Y'all, Wizard101 is about to update dozens of spells. We got a massive set of spell teasers today that we need to talk about. They're changing more spells than I ever thought they could possibly get to in the upcoming Darkmoor update. The topic of today, ramp spells. Now, these are spells that I don't blame y'all if you don't know about these because one, they're only allowed in PvP and they're 3 pips in Live Realm, which is kind of costly. They're changing all of these. One, and this is a huge thing, all of these are going to be allowed in both PvP and PVE now, and a lot of these, instead of being 3 pips, they're gonna be 2 pips and even more potent than they are now. This is a change that literally affects everybody on every single school, so I thought I'd go through all the spell teasers that got teased today for every single school, talk about what they all do, how they affect the game. Starting right off, these are all of the upcoming ice spell changes. Now, you might notice, added on to the ramps that are getting updated, they also basically made every single gambit, the main gambits, allowed in PvE. Now, I will not be talking about these in length for every school because they didn't really change them. I think for ice anyways, all of the top 3 spells, they do a little bit more than they do in Live Realm. To anyone that's confused and wants to use these in PvE, I highly recommend right-clicking on these cards in your spellbook. It'll tell you what you're giving up for doing extra damage. Now, the ramps, these, in my opinion, are the big story for every single school. All of these ice ramps are now 2 pips, and some of them are way better than usual. So ice gets weakness and blade clears for their 3 pip ramps at the moment, but none of them in Live Realm are as good as the ones you see right now because one, they're only 2 pip. What does that mean? That means when you're in combat, all you have to do is change your pip to ice and you immediately have access to very cheap blade and weakness counters. But the blade counters, Wall of Blades and Oni's Destruction, they can turn blades into shields and traps. And compared to the 3 that they clear in Live Realm, they can only clear 2, but obviously the lower pip cost makes them way more worth it. But what I find crazy is how powerful the things that you make for clearing blades are, right? Basically, what Wall of Blades is doing, it clears blades for 40 shields, and Oni's Destruction clears blades for 35% ice trap. That's going to be massive in PvP and PvE, especially because you could do it on any given round. The weakness clears, I would say Jin's Vexation is still pretty ass. It clears weaknesses and puts weaknesses on your opponent, but they're only 20%. But Glacial's Fortress, it clears 2 weaknesses and puts 40 shields on. What does that mean, right? If someone does like a spell like this, where they put a bunch of infections or weaknesses on you, you can get rid of up to 2, and for each one you get rid of, you basically get like a tower shield of defense on. I'm glad they're doing this because there are spells that turn blades into shields like Frostbite. There are spells that turn weaknesses into shields like Evil Snowman. And considering that these actually do damage, I'm very, very happy that they're lowering the cost of these. I think it's actually going to be way more useful because right now, not a lot of people use ramps even in PvP. Moving right along to fire. What you might notice with these teasers is that dot and hot gambits, right? Things like, for example, Fire Oni and Fire Scion for fire, they're not included because they already basically updated them and made them allowed in PvE last update. But the ramps for fire, all of these are also 2 pips, and some of these are really cool because they actually like deal with shields. Now, Oni's Forge and Meltdown, those are the ones that deal with shields. You either can turn them into a damage over time or a heal over time. Now, I'd say these aren't as crazy because Fire Off already clears 2 shields for bonus damage, and it's actually 2 pips. This isn't normally the case with most ramps, them having like a 2 pip counterpart that does damage on that school. But Backfire and Jin's Reversal, these are trap counters. Basically, what these do, you can either turn traps on yourself into overtimes with Backfire, or into really powerful 70% overtime traps with Jin's Reversal. I think Backfire is also pretty bad. I'm looking at the damage. It's very, very little. Yes, if you need a very, very quick trap clear for 2 pips, it's good. I think the real upgrade is Jin's Reversal. And why do I say that? Because let's say someone puts traps on you for a simple 2 pips, just 1 fire pip, even if you're not on a fire. You can turn 2 traps on yourself into 70% overtime traps if you do things like a bomb dot, right? Something that actually takes a while to detonate instead of dots that do damage every round like the other ones that fire has. You can actually combine those specific traps with bomb dots and even detonate them. I could see like a Jin's Reversal burning rampage into the detonate. This basically adds 180% to a dot when you detonate it, and then you could buff it even further with a 70% overtime trap. Right, hopefully I explained it right, but with certain types of damage overtimes, these overtime traps can be way more powerful than a normal overtime trap. Jin's Reversal could be a much better trap counter if you use bomb dots and even detonate them. Now, the storm changes are really, really high damage. Both the Blade Gambit and the Weakness Gambit, right, the one that gives out blades for damage, Scion Scion and the one that gives weaknesses for damage, Turmoil Oni. These are both allowed in PvP and PvE now, as all of these are. They're also buffed a little bit. But I would also argue that a lot of these spells being 3 pips in live realm as they are is just very, very bad. They're very hard to use. Now, a lot of these like anti-dots are a little bit weaker, but also they're 2 pips. So it's a lot easier to use, especially if you're not a storm. So Oni's Attrition and Reap the Whirlwind, what these do, they remove 1 dot on yourself, and Reap the Whirlwind gives you a blade. Oni's Attrition gives you a weakness. Now, these used to be 3 pips and they gave multiple blades or multiple weaknesses, but for just clearing 1 dot, 3 pips was a lot. So I would say these are a little bit more usable now. But Storm's other identity is heal clearing, and we look like we've gotten 2 new heal clears. So Energy Transfer is now a 2 pip heal clear that gives you a Guiding Light, it looks like, which is kind of cool. And Jin's Restoration, weirdly enough, still 3 pips. It clears 1 heal and it gives you a heal in return. This is literally barely any different from, I guess, the Jin's Restoration that we have right now. I'd say out of all the schools, I would argue that Storm didn't really get too much of a change at all, but I will say this, 2 pip dot clears, those I think are going to be used, especially the new Oni's Attrition. It's basically like Lightning Bats, but better, right? Lightning Bats also clears a dot, but it does some very, very small -15 weaknesses, and you need 30% Storm accuracy to use it well. Right, other schools will be using Oni's Attrition, I think. I think that's really going to be the takeaway from these ramp changes for the Storm spells anyway. Now, Mitt's Gambits, even though they're already powerful, like you probably have seen Jin used all the time, they're also still getting a huge buff. Now, what I think is really important about Jin specifically becoming allowed in PvE, this is a new best base hit for Myth Wizard, right? It's very, very easy to put a bunch of shields on yourself in PvE, and basically what Jin does, if you have 4 shields, it gives them up and does 1700 damage. I'd say the shields are definitely the easiest gambit to set up because they're just 0 pips and you get 3 shields for 0 pips and a turn. It's literally worth more than a buff, right? Normally, if you were to do a hitting setup on a Myth, you would do things like bubble, blade, trap. Literally shielding is like a buff now in PvE because Jin gives up shields for extra damage. Scion also gives up traps for extra damage, also allowed in PvE now, but let's talk about these ramps. Myth is the weakness clearing school and also the shield clearing school. They're basically anti-debuff, and all of these ramps are 2 pips. They can clear up to 2 weaknesses or 2 shields. Now, the weakness clearing, right? What Delusion and Oni's Projection do, they can clear up to 2 weaknesses. Delusion makes Myth traps. Oni's Projection creates some very, very weak, like, I think it just creates 1, even if you clear 2 weaknesses, 1 very weak bomb dot for Myth. I don't really see anyone using Oni's Projection. Yes, you're getting rid of 2 weaknesses, but even a Myth has better ways to take, like, you know, those weaknesses and do stuff with it. I'd say Delusion, on the other hand, is very, very useful. Some people don't even run Myth as, like, their main. They run it as a secondary, and they get weakness. You can basically clear these and get really powerful traps. But I'd say the big buff here is definitely the shield counters. Betrayal turns shields into 35 traps, right? So Myth can now clear up to 4 shields with Drop Bear, and now they can also clear up to 2 shields and get a 35 buff. And if you don't want to go the offensive route, the new Jin's defense is looking massive, y'all. It clears up to 2 shields. For each shield clear, it gives you basically a 40% tower. Now, we've never seen a 2-pip Jin's defense before. When it was 3 pips and more powerful than the current live realm version, it was literally spammed in PvP. So I'll say this, I think this one is the first one that actually will harm PvP. I think there will be a lot of people literally just spamming this back and forth. I think that's just the problem with things that counter things and make the same hanging effect happen, right? Shields to shields, for example. You'll have people just running Myth pips and spamming Jin's defense back and forth because now this is really in play again and you don't want to hit through 40 shields ever. So I'm not sure how I feel about this. I think the big story for Myth is Jin's defense and the fact that Jin is literally a PvE hit now. Moving on to Life. Now, Life clearly got the most underwhelming changes because we've already seen the Dot and Hot update, so we've already seen like Jin and Scion change. And while yes, I think in PvE, the Blade Gambit, Oni being allowed, you just have to blade 4 times. It gives up 4 blades for that damage. While that is good, right? You could just use blades for damage anyways without giving them up. So I'm not sure it's a big game changer. And you might notice, just like before, the anti-dots, they're not that good. They're still 3 pips, right? Jin's Affliction and Meditation are still 3 pips. They can clear a dot and either give you a dot or a heal over time in return, depending on which one you use. I think spells like Camp Bandit and definitely Earthwalker are just better because for 1 extra pip, they can clear up to 2 dots and do way more damage. But the trap counters, at least I would argue, even if you're not on a life, are a little bit more useful because there are 2 pips for clearing 2 traps. So Tranquility turns traps into heals. If you're running outgoing, this could be very, very good if you don't have like an extra trap left over. And Oni's Naturalism, this is a big one. It's, I would argue, the most used trap counter outside of life anyway. In Live Realm, it clears up to 3 traps, but you get some pretty weak 15% blades. Now, you're clearing only 2 traps, but you're getting 30% life blade. We've seen a lot of blade identity for life, right? Lord of the Jungle, 45 blades, right? Luminous, it also gives you pretty decent blade. Nature's Wrath gives up a dot for 65% blade. So now this is yet another really strong blade that you could get for doing something productive, like removing a trap. I think that's a good thing because a lot of people are annoyed at how heal spammy life can get, especially in PvP. I would argue, if you know that you're gonna get trapped, it's actually a pretty good PvE tool as well because you can get rid of a trap while blading. That's good for defense and offense at the same time. Now, Death. These are the teasers for Death. They got a lot this update. First off, just like Myth, a shield gambit being allowed in PvE Doom Oni, that is a very, very big deal. This is also what I would argue the new best hit for PvE for Death anyways. But just like every other school we mentioned, having other gambits available in PvE could be really, really cool, right? Scion, it's looking real powerful. It's a weakness gambit. You need 4 weaknesses. Jhin, you need 4 blades to do the extra damage. These are either all better or allowed in PvE when they weren't, or literally both, so really big. But why did I say that this is a big update for Death? The ramps are crazy. So let's look at the heal counters, right? Contagion clears 1 heal and puts a -65 infection on for just 2 pips now. Now, if you play Death, you'll know that things like Skeletal Pirate and Anubis are very punishing heal counters already, but let's say that you're not running an anti-heal secondary in PvP. It's really nice for 2 pips to clear 1 heal and even do things that are helpful for future heals like Contagion. Right, so now when someone Goat Monks you, you can get rid of the heal, put a 65 infection, the next Goat Monk won't be good, and you only lost 2 pips for it. I think Oni's Morbidity is pretty cool too. So if someone like Goat Monks you, right, a single heal, you can get rid of it and put 225 shields on yourself. Pretty powerful defense compared to what we're used to right now. The blade counters aren't bad either, y'all. Putrefaction clears up to 2 blades and puts 20 universal weaknesses. This is, believe it or not, the only blade to universal weakness spell in the game. We haven't had anything like this since a long time ago. And why is that important? Because while yes, Death does get things that turn blades into school-specific weaknesses, that is useless if someone's blading and using an off-school hit. We've seen people do that running life and Myth secondary, and they do a bunch of Myth blades, heal spam using their life stuff, hit with their Myth side. So I'd say Putrefaction is somewhat usable. Jhin's Larceny, obviously it's a Death blade to blade, so it's only really something Death could use, but it turns up to 2 blades into 2 blades for yourself as a Death. They're 30%. Very, very good if you're running Death secondary or you're just a Death. Finally, I saved the best for last. These are the balance spell teasers from today. Now, they are fully changing the way balance works. Yet again, what you might notice about the ramp specifically, they're not counters like all the other ones. They're just spells that give you things. And at least everyone can use these for just 1 balance pip. So at least you can't argue that it's a balance buff. Literally anyone can learn these and use them. But the ramps are tied to new gambits that we've never seen before. I will explain these to the best of my ability. Because they're allowed in PvE, everyone should be using them. But Duststorm Jhin, it does basically a triple hit, where if you do what it wants you to do, basically each part of this triple hit does nearly 600 damage. What this card is saying is, right, if you have 2 heals on yourself and 2 shields on yourself, this spell will give it up and do nearly 1800 damage total. A third of it is balance damage, a third of it is life damage, a third of it is ice damage. It's basically a triple hit. And Jhin's Fortune helps you set up these heals and shields. For 2 pips, you get 1 heal and 1 shield. If you use 2 of these Jhin's Fortunes in a row, you basically set up Duststorm Jhin right then and there. Another thing worth noting, right? The combination of life and ice, the only shield that can deal with it is the new crystal shield that just got added. But if you're using the normal like Ellie shield or spirit shield for defense, you won't actually get as much use out of it because the triple hit that Jhin does will ignore 2 out of the 3 shields. This is relevant in PvE because you won't ever see anyone using crystal shield in PvE. You'll only ever see elemental shields or set shields that only interact with 1 out of the 3 hits. But yes, Jhin, it's like a shield and heal gambit Definitely useful, definitely powerful. Tribunal Oni is somehow even weirder. It basically does way extra damage with Storm Myth and balance damage, but what you're giving up is an aura on yourself and 3 trap. Now, the aura is very, very easy. You can just do a brace, you can do an amplify, you can do anything. This is very, very easy to set up. I'd also argue that triple traps are very, very easy for balance to use because these are 1-pip spells that you could pip conserve. So you could even have a power pip and use them. So it's a much easier thing to set up than whatever Oni and Tribunal Oni are now. Right now, not only are these not allowed in PvP, but they're like weird. They're like Blade and Weakness and Shield and Trap, and they're not really as good as what we're seeing right now in these teasers. Right, elemental damage, you just need 1 Ellie shield or 1 Spirit shield to counter either of these. So it's kind of bad. I think the way they're combining schools, as complicated as these are to set up, is pretty cool. And just like Jin's Fortune, I guess, as a spell, Oni's Shadow is very weird. It's an aura and trap spell. And yes, y'all read that right. It's a 2-pip spell that gives you basically a brace and 235 universal trap. Now, a lot of people already have a problem with how many braces and auras completely have taken over PvP. This is now a 2-pip one, meaning you could use this at full pips and not actually be suboptimal, right? This new Oni Shadow spell is way more optimal now because you could get rid of a trap aura, get some defense, and get some offense with traps. These are universal, meaning every school could be using these. Out of all of these ramps anyways, I'd say the balance ones and Jin's defense, the mid shield to shield, those are the ones I'm very, very concerned about. But other than that, these were all way more usable. We're definitely going to see them used way more than they are right now. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be wondering, what's going to happen to school identity if all it takes is 1 school pip that you can set even mid-combat to use these in PvP and PvE? And I think the good news is, no matter what, the schools that these gambits are for will always be the ones that use them better because they can leverage the things that they make better. But I will say this, if you're dueling into one of those schools, you might have a lot more options. This is both in PvP and PvE. I hope I explained all of these well. I think some of these schools are literally changing like balance. Others are just getting buffs to things that they otherwise would have never been able to use. And the fact that they're allowed in PvE makes the bridge between the 2 side activities, right? Like questing and PvP. I think that bridge is going to be a little stronger. Maybe a lot more people will feel comfortable using these when they can test them out more easily against like minions and mobs while they're questing and farming. But let me know y'all's thoughts on all of these changes. Definitely going to be a big part of this update, but this isn't even all of it. So turn on noties so you don't miss any of the teaser coverage. Drop a like if you enjoyed, y'all. Leave a sub review. And as always, if somebody hasn't told you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome. See y'all soon. And yeah.